Hello, hello. Welcome to 2022. Super excited to be here with you. It is the first live broadcast of the year, and we are going to talk about how do you finally get those resolutions that you've been trying to bring to fruition, perhaps sometimes for years, to bring them into reality and actually make them stick. So, and if you're catching the replay and this is like, halfway through the year and you're like, okay, I just want to know how to fix my life and get over some of these patterns that I keep doing, you can do these any time of the year. It will absolutely still work and make a lot of sense. So I hope that's works for you. Now, chat box, hey, say hello to me. Let me know you're there. I had a few texts saying, hey, I can't wait to actually be live again. So I'd love to hear from you over there. So bring them all out. And let's dive in. So I'm going to tell you, this is something that I've spent a long time trying to figure out because I am someone who, like all of us, is going through the human experience, is very much a creature of habit and pattern. And the interesting thing about habits is they can be like as strong when they're good or as when they're bad. And even if we want to replace these bad habits, they're so ingrained in who we are that it can be almost like impossible to see the fact that one day they actually may be able to change. And I am living proof that they can. So I'm going to share with you some of my strategies. Oh, we've got some people saying hello, so let's do that. Thank you very much, Harrison. It's exciting to start a new year. Not so great that we're on another lockdown here in Ontario, but you know what? I'm glad we have the internet and we can do these shows. And yes, Greg, awesome to see you here as well. So super excited about that. All right, so we're going to talk about these in the context of resolutions. But again, remember, if you're watching this sometime later, it's exactly the same thing. It's like, when do you decide that you want to change how you're showing up in your life? And this is the system that I use. Danielle, awesome to have you here too. 2022. No. We're not using the TOO. It is all in TWO around here. But I've seen that, and that's no, we're not doing another 2020. Although we are starting off just like a little reminiscent, but that's all right. All right. So the first thing we have to think about is, and one of the reasons why I think New Year's resolutions fail so routinely is because they start on the wrong day. The whole concept of January 1 being the day that you're going to never eat sweets again, or, start to lose weight, or finally do X, right? It just doesn't make sense. Like, most people are hungover. I mean, not me, because my New Year's are not that exciting, especially during these days. I'm not somebody who does a lot during New Year's, but for many people, they might be hungover. They might be tired because you stayed up later than your normal bedtime. And then you wake up and you're not in routine. Like, so often, if we want to fix things in our lives and change how we're showing up, then we can't start it on a day when it's not part of our daily routine. And so I'm going to challenge you at the beginning of the new year to aim for December 10th as your day for New Year's resolutions. Okay, which sounds really silly, but for me, I have found that if I can push it back to when I'm back into routine, like my normal day to day, like even yesterday, was sort of a holiday, right? So it wasn't like a normal day that I would go on. So number one, choose when you're going to start. Now, if it's not the New Year's thing, then we still need to, anytime we're going to do it, I would say that the best day is the next day. So one of the things when I decided to do 75 hard, for those of you who followed along last year, and currently I'm in what they call phase 1. So it's after you've successfully completed the 75-day challenge, and then you go into this next phase, which quite frankly is quite a bit harder. But I'm doing it on day 6. And he says, like, you know what, start tomorrow. Like, just start now. Like, and so often people say, oh, I'm going to do 75 hard and I'm going to start it on, September 3rd. Well, why? No, if you want to live a healthy life, if you want to get into this new habit, then you need to figure out how to do it right now. Right. But in this case, I'm saying for new resolutions, aim to start after you're back into the normal groove. So that's important. The next thing is we got to figure out, what are you trying to change? Because a lot of times with our resolutions, and actually I'd love to hear from you, like, do you love resolutions? Like, do they stick for you? I think another reason why for many people they don't is because we're setting the wrong intention. Okay, so work with me here. Number one, it's often really extreme. So this is the year I'm going to go to the gym every day, and yet you haven't gone to the gym at all, right? Or it's, I'm going to lose 100 pounds. Well, okay, let's start with 10. But even then, it's still the wrong goal. And weight loss is a great one, because I mean, I've struggled with that on and off throughout my entire life. But so I can use it as a great example. But if you think about, okay, setting the goal of, I want to lose 20 pounds, it makes sense. You think that's a good goal. But the truth of the matter is, it won't actually necessarily, for some people it will, get you down 20 pounds. Instead, if you think of, okay, let's use, and this is where I'd put the problem solving framework on top of this, real issue, self-awareness, what's contributing to making the real issue harder to deal with, and or how am I reacting to the situation, and then solution activation, right? Diet, etc. But one of the things is, let's say like you're an emotional eater, okay? And if your resolution is to lose 20 pounds, but if you don't actually deal with the emotional eating, the 20 pounds is a non-issue, because it's either A, won't happen, or B, won't stay off. Okay, and this can be for anything, by the way, like any goal that we're aiming for. And so my thinking is, if we want to accomplish that ultimate goal, we have to look at what are the issues that are causing it and make our goals around that. So for example, if emotional eating is one for you, then next time I am feeling really charged and emotional, my goal is not to reach for the bag of chips, but instead to reach for an apple. So replace the habit with something different. Okay. So if we can go to the underlying issue, because then if we can solve that piece of the puzzle, then the 20 pounds becomes like just a default. Right. So again, I don't know, you could have other types of resolutions. I want to quit smoking. Well, okay. I remember when I was younger and I smoked, and in my 20s, I ended up quitting, thank goodness. But it wasn't just as easy as saying, I'm never going to quit again. And I know there are people who can do the whole cold turkey thing and all of that. I mean, obviously this was 20 years ago for me. But what I recognized was there were a few pieces. I needed to replace what I was going to do in those moments when I would normally grab for a cigarette, right? Like, I had to figure out, what was I going to do instead? And so if you build that into the goal, so instead of grabbing for that, I'm going to do this, then by default, you would not smoke as much. Okay. And now actually the way I can always do one on that, I mean, it was 20 years ago, right? But how I quit was, I actually was like, my goal was not about never smoking again. It was about getting to another moment in the day without having one. So it was first like, can I, have my morning coffee without a smoke? And then can I drive to work? And on the second half, I could have my first cigarette, right? And then I just slowly inched it up every 10 minutes throughout the day. And then all of a sudden it was 7 o'clock at night and I hadn't had one. And then the next day it was like, oh my God, I've made it till 8 o'clock. Like, I pushed it harder. Why would I even bother? And it took me like 2.5 weeks to sort of do that escalation. But if the goal would have been don't smoke, what it was don't, get to that next level. Not don't, just get to that next level. Okay. So that was it. And, for those of you who, when you were younger, made dumb decisions about your health, there's one that was my confession. I think back then it was a lot more acceptable than it is now. Let's be honest. Okay. So that we want to look at, what goals are you setting? And the funny thing is that it's like, if we want to change our life, it's the mundane stuff that's going to do it. It's not the big wow factor stuff. It's the how do you show up each and every day. So if your goal is to include more happiness and joy into your life, then what are you going to do with that? Well, okay, you can't say like every day is going to be totally joyful, right? Like, hey, it would be awesome if it was. But what if you could set the goal of finding something in nature that you're mesmerized by every day and just doing like a 2 or 3 minute thing, right? And then that would just slowly, and that was one of the ways I brought more joy and peace into my life, was I just started off really small, looking at like, okay, how do I notice that in the middle of all the stuff I'm dealing with around me? That beautiful bird, right? Or that really kind friend who just said something kind, right? That to me has been really, those small stepping stones, which brings me to the next place. Okay. So it needs to be, I think, to really accomplish our goals this year, we want to figure out, okay, what are all the small little things that if I do them combined will reach the big goal? And make the resolutions about those small things, because added up, they will ultimately create what we want them, the outcome that we're looking for, right? So for me, that was really helpful. Okay, so we've talked about the fact that resolutions start on the wrong day. Wait till you're back into your regular routine. Resolutions are too extreme and they take too long to come to fruition. So instead, looking on those mini achievements and small steps that when combined will get you that ultimate win. And it's about the day-to-day, not the big wow factor. Okay. Now, I've already touched on this, but I will bring it up. Again, resolutions don't address the underlying cause of what is causing the issue that you want to change. And so you want to get super, super curious, compassionately about your patterns and your triggers. And when you know what those are, then you can create a game plan to actually interrupt the patterns. Like, how cool would that be if you could be like, okay, so going back to the weight loss example, when I am, I walk by the chocolates, I automatically grab one. Okay, well, let's put them in a place that you don't see them, right? Like just little things like that, so that when you are not tempted, but if we put the goal on the trigger and dealing with the underlying cause, then we can not do that. Like we can actually make things change. Right. If there are any thoughts or things you want to add in here, by all means, like throw your name up there in the chat box, and would love to hear from you and your different ideas that go along with this as well. So, yeah, like it was fun to be back talking on being here with you in the new year. All right. So next thing is you may ultimately end up getting busy and forgetting your resolutions. Who's ever done that, right? It's like, I want to do this thing. And then like 4 days later, just right back to your old patterns. It's a non-issue. And like you're like, oh, right, I was going to fix that. And then you've slipped into this old pattern and you're just not moving forward. And this is how we end up repeating our lives, being so incredibly the same, unless we do something specific and proactively to actually make adjustments to our patterns. All right. So it's easy to get busy and forget, which is why we need accountability. And accountability is really great at the front end when you're enthusiastic about it. What we really need, though, is accountability that gets you to the point when you don't need accountability anymore. So again, using the example of 75 hard, I knew for 75 days I had to post on Instagram into my stories that I had successfully completed it. And I wasn't willing to be the person who didn't finish it, because I've had a lot of friends of mine start 75 hard and they kind of go gangbusters and they're posting and they're posting and they're posting. And then all of a sudden, no more posts. I didn't want to be that person. And so there was a time limit on my accountability, which was really powerful, I think. And it also, when we're creating habits, is when there is a time limit, we can look at it and go, I can do anything for 30 days. And then at the end of 30 days, can I reassess if I want to continue doing this? Okay, so that can be really helpful, but we've got to look at how do you put the accountability into place, not for right now when everybody's just kind of excited about it, in 15 days, in 30 days, in 6 months, 6 weeks, right? Like put somebody in charge of that. Now, it might be a business coach. It might be you putting some money on the line and hiring somebody. It could be somebody like me, right? Where we're going to hold your feet to the fire and have an expectation of you. Which brings me to the next point, is your expectations of yourself. You know, with all this reading that I've been doing, and I mean, I've been doing a lot lately, but I've also been doing a lot for many, many years, is understanding that we will default to who we truly believe we are. And so if you've set a goal that I'm going to, run every morning, and you don't see yourself as a runner, you're probably not going to be able to accomplish it. So much of what it takes to be able to fix the patterns that we're not happy with in our lives is to change how we perceive ourselves. Because if we see ourselves as somebody who works out every day, then you know what? You're going to work out every day. If you don't see yourself as somebody who works out every day, then you're going to be fighting it. You're going to be fighting that human nature to not do the thing. Because if you see yourself as somebody who's lazy and doesn't, and you should never say that about yourself. I don't like those words, but if that's how you see yourself, then you're probably going to have a tough time finding the energy and the momentum and the expectation to actually go and do that thing that doesn't align with who you believe you are. Another thing about choosing our goals is, Brenda said something here. Let me come on here. Brenda, the same thing over is not going to get any different result. Yes, it's like it's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and over and again and expecting a different result. And my thinking is that we've got to interrupt those patterns. We've got to go, no, you know what? This is no longer acceptable to me. I am someone who believes I deserve X, or I am, I am a person who has a healthy lifestyle. I'm a person who can, always does what they say they're going to do. I'm somebody who socializes regularly, or whatever, right? There's so many things that you just have to start believing who you are and what your expectations are of yourself in order to do those things. Now, in terms of actually getting the new pattern ingrained into your life, something I've noticed that's really helpful is it's like we often are talking about taking something away. But when you delete something out of your life, whether it's a word, whether it's a bad habit like smoking or vaping or something like that, or it's, not exercising, we talk about deleting it, but then there's space. And unless we proactively fill that space and choose how we're going to use our energy during that time, then it's going to default to old patterns. That's what happens. And so instead, we want to be like, okay, could I add something instead of taking something away? So let's say you're like, okay, I'm never eating fries again. Okay, as part of a healthy journey. Well, you may. So what about this? Instead of, I'll get the fries if I want the fries, but for every time I put fries on the plate, I need to put vegetables on the plate and eat them first before I go to the fries, right? Add the vegetables to every meal, and then it'll sort of inch out the unhealthy stuff. That at least has been sort of helpful for me. I've written here, will default to old behaviors in the absence of a new one. And the idea being that all the small wins need to nudge out the big win. Okay, so if you were a smoker, then, if you added in exercise, your body is going to start clearing everything out of your lungs, and you're not going to want to actually have the smoke going in when you become a healthy person and you see yourself as somebody who's really healthy, right? It's just, at least that's what I found really to be helpful. All right. So, and I think, I use this in my book. I have a book. Well, you all know the book. I talk about this in my book, but and it applies. The whole idea about solution activation is that a slip does not mean you need to stop, right? It's because if we have these patterns ingrained, and sometimes for decades, right? Like, maybe you snap at somebody when you're in a bad mood or whatever it is. I don't know, whatever your thing is. What we really want to do is we want to get to a point where we interrupt that pattern faster. Okay. Instead of, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Oh, well, I ate fries, so I guess now I'm never going to be able to eat healthily ever again. No. Okay. Next time, have half the fries, then have a quarter of the fries, then have none of the fries, right? Like, I don't know why I'm picking on fries today. Eat fries if you want fries. I don't know. But I really find that, understanding that it's a process, right? You've had so many years of putting things into your life that we don't want to just expect us to take them out and then setting ourselves up for judgment. This is why I'm so incredibly committed to the concept of being compassionately curious with yourself. Compassionately curious, as opposed to being judgmental and harsh and thinking you're an absolute idiot because you failed at achieving this thing. And another one is solution activation principles. Your second response is the priority. Get to it ASAP. So if you default to something, that's no problem. Great. Yeah, of course you did, because that's human nature. That's the human experience. That's why we do the problem solving on the human experience issues, so that we can actually improve and continue to better ourselves, right? It's not, it's not like we suck one day and then we're brilliant the next. Like, it's not like how it works. It's like we go a little bit more, like a little wiser, and then we well, maybe I'm not that wise, and then we go back up and over. Right. And so that's why the accountability over the course of the long term is so critical, because we can see the macro growth as opposed to focusing in on the little micros and the steps back that maybe just are not as, just not as, exciting for us, or can be really disappointing. When we look at the macro level of growth, that's when it matters. So those are my thoughts. I don't know. I'm sure I have more. I have lots of notes in front of me. I should just have a quick look to be sure I didn't forget anything. I'm going to write an article on this, because I really do feel, frustrated for people who say, oh, no, I've given up on New Year's resolutions. And then, by the way, I don't think a resolution is necessarily the most important thing. And it doesn't have to happen at the beginning of the year, except that this gives us the pause. I mean, the fact that we've been on vacation for many people in sort of that, hazy time of the year where everything is just sort of like, what day is it? Do I have to be anywhere? Which pajamas shall I wear today? That it gives you a nice running start to be like, okay, now I'm going to do something new. Like, it almost interrupts your patterns for you. But again, I think that the real brilliance is when you wait and you're back into your normal routine, and then you start putting some of these ideas and concepts into place with the view of that long-term growth. I think that for me has really been quite pivotal. And I admit I've struggled over the years with figuring this out. And I'm also feeling very proud of myself lately for being able to implement a lot of this stuff. And these have been the ways that I've been able to figure out how to do that. Greg's got some advice here. I find there can be a fine line between trying to stay accountable and not pushing yourself so far that you lose sight of your primary goal. Yeah. And you know what? It's interesting, because there's this teeter-totter between personal kindness, being kind to ourselves, and pushing ourselves to achieve what we're really possible for us to achieve. Because I think one of the things I'm trying to play with in my own life is because I've become so compassionately curious with myself and so understanding because of my pain issues and, some of my health challenges and things that I've had to deal with, that I can let myself off the hook with a pretty legitimate excuse on most days. You know what I mean? And so I'm playing with, when do I need to push and push harder? Or when am I just retreating into my comfort zone? Something to think about in your own life, right? Like, where is that fine line? And it's a nuance. It's not a science. It's like, okay, you know what? Today, no, I got to push. And in actual fact, last night, I was pretty tired. I'm doing the 75 hard challenge. So in addition to the regular 75 hard expectations, like working out twice a day, you have to do 8 power tasks. Those are tasks of your choosing, and a cold shower for 5 minutes and visualization for 10. And last night I was like, you know what? I'm not going to get through 2 of my power tasks. And I had my cold shower and I was like, in this cold shower going, you know what? You're going to stay in here. And that's a mental game all on its own. And I was like, you know what, Allison? Like, do not cheat yourself. You go get those last 2 tasks done. And I did. And oh my God, it felt good. But I could have easily been like, well, I did all these other tasks. And so I could make those my power tasks. Right. And I was like, nope, we're going to get it done. And I did. And it wasn't because, I'm special or anything. Like, it's just, we all have these times when we can push ourselves, but it's the internal voice and it's the expectation of ourselves. And I've chosen to believe that I'm someone who can complete 75 hard for the entire year. So meaning there's a 75 hard living program, which is like there are 3 other challenges throughout the course of the year that I'm going to complete because I've already done the tough one, right? So why can't I? And last night I almost didn't, but slip does not mean you need to stop. Anyway. Okay, I think that is where I'm going to close it out for today. I'm so grateful to have you back here. I hope that 2022 is off to an incredible start for you. I mean, obviously, for those of you who are listening and you are in Ontario, I haven't watched the news to know what's happening across the rest of the country so far today. I know Quebec and Ontario are both in lockdown, and quite frankly, that sucks, especially for business owners who rely on in-person, myself being no, I wouldn't say totally me, but I mean, I am definitely not impressed with it. And I use my own advice, right? Like, focus on what we control, focus on our attitude, see the silver linings in it. Yeah, we can go on and on. I'll do that in another one. Okay. I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope that 2022 is going to be your absolute best year yet. All right. Thank you. And I will see you next time. Until then, may you stress less, do more, and be happier. Bye for now.